Hello and welcome to the Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Munoz, CEO of the Cultural Communications Agency, D Flash. Each episode, I bring a different person from business who's doing some game-changing work. And as we kick off 2021, hallelujah, 2020 is over. I'm so excited to talk to Danielle Sunberg and Ted Moskovitz, who are the co-founders of AMMA, which are incredible products to calm you the heck down. And I think we'll have a great conversation that you guys will really enjoy. And I think it's a really great transition and hearing their story. Take a listen. Hey guys, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Laura.
Thanks for having us.
Totally. So even though I have two of you on the line, the podcast does not change. So it can either be Danielle or Ted, because you both have to answer. What was your first job?
I'll take it. Yeah. So my first job was working in a fabric warehouse. I was basically hauling around giant bolts of fabric that hadn't been touched in years and were covered in dust and all sorts of crazy kind of stuff. And I think, more than anything, it was really a lesson that my parents were teaching me. My dad grew up in the Soviet Union and was a religious refugee who escaped in the early 70s and came to Canada and had, a whole series of difficult jobs. And I think it was really important for them that I sort of had an experience of what, it really was to work physically for a living, both to have an appreciation for, everyone around me who was doing it, but also I think maybe some encouragement for me to study really hard in school as well.
Awesome. And how about you, Danielle? What was your first job?
So my first job was, pretty standard. I think probably a lot of your listeners shared this job, which was doing chores around the house, getting that allowance for being responsible and meeting the expectations of my parents to then have a little freedom to buy something at the store, the five and dime, whatever. And that's, just the early inculcation of values.
Yeah, I think, it's always funny. I always ask this question and I'm always fascinated by the answers and how folks, when they look back on their first job, you're like, you know what, that actually makes sense to kind of what I do now. And like, being responsible, taking care of what I wanted to take care of, and helping others is the thing that I started out doing. And then here I am, whatever job I've got now, it also relates to that. And I think that's an interesting segue to kind of talk about you guys. So obviously, after your first jobs, you had some other things that you did to get to AMMA. Why don't you tell us about that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So both Ted and I actually started our legal careers together. We were both formerly attorneys in Washington, D.C. So my first real linear traditional path towards a profession was as a lawyer, and I worked for a judge, and then I worked for a firm in D.C. as a commercial litigator. And that led me to where I am today precisely because of how dissatisfied I was. Working at a firm and the culture there and waking up every day wanting to press the snooze button, not because I was tired, but I didn't want to face going into the office and having another day that I know would loom on forever and feel just like a drain of energy. And then coming home and just immediately wanting to, watch TV, numb myself, disassociate from the day. And so finally it got to a place where actually after my trial, where we successfully defended my client against a $6 billion judgment, the day that we won, the partner on the case called me and said, I'm going on vacation, see you in 2 weeks. And I said, nope, actually I'm quitting. And he could not believe it because it just seems like such a capstone to a career that's something that you build off of and creating so much success. And I just knew that this was the moment for me to leave because everything that I saw in everybody looking at me was respect, validation, impressed, and worthiness. And I just didn't feel it in my own heart when I look at myself in the mirror. And I knew that there was just something missing, that I didn't feel what everybody else saw when they looked at me. And so, I went to a doctor and a therapist, and it was pathologized as depression, which makes sense. And so I went and had a prescription for an antidepressant, and I kind of looked at the script in my hand, and it just also didn't feel like the right answer for me. And what that really is leading me to and telling you this is that we are empowered to find our own wellness. And that is the journey I took when I left the law firm, which is how to create wellness from the inside out. And that might include antidepressants for some people. It's really just taking the power back to decide for yourself what it is that makes you feel well when you get up in the morning and when you go to sleep at night. Like, you can be tired when you go to sleep at night, but do you feel drained, right? And so that led us on an adventure to backpacking the world and kind of discovering what it means to create our life on our own terms and make our own happiness. And that's led us to create AMMA, which I know we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah. And for me, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's awesome. Thanks, Danielle. Ted, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I had a little bit of a similar path in that, I started out on these sort of traditional career paths. I'd been working in politics for a US senator, and then went to law school, and I was a securities lawyer at the SEC, which was really, for the type of things I was studying at the time, sort of the pinnacle of achievement, for people who are in my lane. But very quickly after starting there, I began to realize this really wasn't for me and wasn't my passion and wasn't my purpose. And I didn't feel that it allowed me to bring my superpowers and gifts out into the world. And so, my journey was really one of struggling with, how do you walk away from something that has so much prestige associated with it? And, I was a very ego-driven person at the time, and I loved telling people I was this SEC lawyer and all these things. And I've thankfully shifted a lot since then, but really it was a journey of kind of self-discovery, of redefining myself. When you're not your profession, sort of what are you? And so I was able to leave the SEC and started my own company, and spent the last few years working in technology as an investor and an advisor and a founder. And really, what I've been focused on is just this question of how do we upgrade the human OS, our own operating system, the hardware and software that sort of runs our minds and bodies. And so there's a lot of different ways that has manifested for me with, doing work in genetics and precision medicine and anti-aging, longevity, and people talk a lot about biohacking and cognitive hacking and all the things around that. But with AMMA, what really has been inspiring me is the shift that we're helping people make toward healthier ways of relaxing and unwinding. And I just see so many people, living with anxiety and living with fear and just really not being present and connected to themselves. And so what I think my purpose is to help people shift out of those states into presence and into connection and just really feeling like the best selves that they can be.
That's awesome. And I think, it's so timely. I think, 5 years ago, if people were talking about mental health, depression, anxiety, it was looked upon as like, wait, why are you talking about this publicly? And I think one of the good blessings about all of this is that we've sort of gotten rid of that shame and that fear around it. And, some folks still have a lot of difficulty talking about it, but there's a renewed openness about our mental health and our anxieties and how that degrades us, and finding solutions that work for us, whether that's a meditation app, whether that's products, whether that's medication. So I think it's so nice to hear that, like, that's how you guys started out and came to this journey. So how did that lead you all to founding AMMA?
Yeah, it's funny. I've been working sort of tangentially to the cannabis industry for a number of years. Nothing, plant touching, all sort of picks and shovels, tech tools and things like that at the periphery. And so I'd had the opportunity to try cannabis products a good number of times and tried CBD a lot, and frankly, just never really had any effect from it. It didn't really do much for me other than make me kind of sleepy. And so I had written off the entire industry. And then a couple of years ago, just had this really profound conversion experience. A friend of ours out in Colorado said, hey, we've invented this new method for extracting cannabinoids. It's really interesting. You should check it out. And because of my skepticism at the time, I said, no, thank you, not interested. But fortunately, the universe conspired to bring me out there anyways. And I had a chance to drop in with them and try some of what they were working on. And just, felt this immediate reduction in my social anxiety and felt this sort of presence that was almost like a post-meditative state. And it made me just realize, wow, there's a lot of potential in this space if people just treat it with respect and they have respect for the plant and they extract, in ways that are scientifically grounded and that make sense and allow us to produce, these real healing extracts. So, for me, it was really simple. It was just, I had this profound experience for myself. I realized that the state of the industry overall was pretty poor, realized that there was a way to help a lot of people at scale with these products. And so just felt compelled to be one of the people to jump in and see if we could help do it.
And for me, I really did this huge deep dive into wellness and what it means to create your own wellness from the inside out. And with that, I became a Reiki master, which is an energy healing holistic modality, and a transformational coach with that. And what I learned is that wellness is a subtractive experience. And what I mean by that is that when we think we're, like you said, Laura, like when we go get our meditation app or the wearable tech or whatever it is that we think we're doing to create wellness, the external thing itself isn't giving us wellness. It's allowing us to connect to the wellness that already thrives within us. And that's a huge shift in perspective when I learned it, and I'm sure for other people as that connects with them, because it teaches us that there's nothing for us to fix. We're not broken. It's just the anxiety and the fear and all the mental noise that clouds us from our connection to wellness. And so when Ted introduced me to the CBD extraction and the products, and I got to experience them for myself, I had a eureka moment with him where I noticed this is doing that subtractive experience. This is a tool like a meditation app or a walk in nature or yoga or a Reiki, where it allows us to really connect to that pure, present, loving awareness inside all of us. And with that, it became obvious to create AMMA.
Awesome. That's a great path to getting there. So there's a ton of brands out there. What makes AMMA so unique?
Yeah, there's a couple of different things. One is the way in which we are actually extracting the cannabinoids from the plant. So we talk about our products as the cold pressed juice of hemp. And essentially what we mean is, usually extraction is a high temperature process and a very solvent intensive process. And what people don't realize is that these cannabinoids, especially some of the minor cannabinoids and terpenes and flavonoids and all these therapeutic compounds that are in the plant, they become degraded when exposed to high heat and to really high pressures and to all these chemical solvents. And so what we were able to do was extract it in a way that didn't degrade any of the beneficial compounds that were in there. So that's sort of on the side of like the product itself, right? Then there's also the perspective that we take as a company, which I think is refreshing. Typically in the supplements industry, there's very much this notion of, you're broken, take this product, it will fix you. I mean, that is how it's done, right? That's how people market. And we decided that we want to just flip that script on its head, like Danielle was just saying, and just teach people that there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You are already whole and you are already well. You just need to do some things that help you realize that and help you enter that state. So I think that's something that's really refreshing in how we talk about the company and the culture that we create, is one that's really empowering people and not teaching them that there's anything wrong with them. And then in terms of what's really unique about what we're doing with the products now is the direction that we're going in of having formulations for specific purposes in the sort of beverage category. So our top selling product is called Elevate Elixir, which is designed as an alcohol alternative. And we're the only people who are doing this. And essentially what we're trying to do is, how do we give people the same relaxation ritual that they associate with alcohol, but with products that are actually really helpful for them and not harmful? So how do we help reduce people's anxiety? How do we shift people into their, parasympathetic nervous system, right? The opposite of our fight or flight response, feel, calm, cool, collected, but without getting foggy and disconnected as alcohol tends to do, and instead get people more present and more connected. So really what's interesting about what we're doing is we're creating this new category of nightlife beverage for people to enjoy, when they go out or at home, that has some of the positives of the alcohol experience, but without any of the negative effects and brain damage and liver damage and all these harmful things that we know come from that.
Okay, so as someone who loves a good alcoholic beverage,
Yeah.
tell me more about this non-alcoholic situation. So Elevate basically would you say it's like a mixed drink kind of thing, or is it more like having a White Claw without having have alcohol in it?
Yeah, it's a beverage additive. So you craft, some delicious beverage for yourself and you add Elevate to it to give it effect, essentially. A lot of people, if they're not drinking alcohol, the only option for them is like a club soda with lime, which I think frankly gets quite boring. We're allowing people to do real mixology and put thought into, what tastes delicious and what do I really enjoy, but just give it a little bit of a boost or elevate, the drink, so to speak, to give them the effect that they're looking for. And, I wouldn't say that we're so anti-alcohol, right? I think there's a place for alcohol in society. It's just, how do we give people other options, right? When you have early yoga class the next day, or if you're someone who practices mindfulness and meditation, you find that it gets you foggy, right? It's really just all about having other options for people to explore and finding what works best for them.
Yeah, it's funny, like one of the annoying things, I mean, better things about the pandemic is that I drink a whole lot less now because part of my job was to go out with clients and take them out for a drink, take them out for dinner, meet someone for a drink for a business meeting. You can't really do that anymore. So my alcohol tolerance fell off a cliff. So I can't drink more than a couple of glasses of wine before I'm ready to fall asleep, which is heartbreaking. But I have, obviously, because even though I live in New York, so it's technically not legal, but I think I know a thing or two about edibles, and they've been super helpful. And I think, finding ways to kind of calm down and chill as a result of like living through 2020 gave everyone a reason to sort of try some different things to help take the edge off and just kind of and be calm.
Yeah.
And so would you say that like the Elevate sort of works like, I guess, like a bitters where you sort of put on the top of whatever drink you've made? So if you, mix some pineapple and club soda juice together and then you just add a couple dabs of Elevate and then stir it up and then you're ready to go. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think, the point that you're making about quarantine is so interesting because, so many people at home right now, it's almost too easy to like go to the fridge and get a beer or a glass of wine. You're someone who's been drinking a lot less. I think a lot of people who are experiencing a lot of stress have been drinking a lot more. And so, really it's exactly what you said of how do we create, a non-alcoholic beverage that can still give us that relaxing and unwinding effect. And the actual how of it is exactly as you described, mix up your mixers of choice and add this to it, stir it up, and you're ready to go with a relaxing beverage.
Sounds awesome. Can't wait to try. So, in the land of all the kind of cannabis drinks and CBD drinks and hemp products, I mean, this market is pretty crowded. How have you guys been able to kind of step out and away and sort of kind of craft your own blue ocean, especially with 2020 being as crazy as it was?
Well, I would start off to say that what I love about this industry is it's actually a lot of co-opetition, which is a new word for me when I got into this industry, which is basically like, collaborative co-opetition, now I'm getting competition. So what it really means is like, yes, we're in the same space, but we've also had to deal with the same hurdles, regulatory, marketing restrictions, supply chain, payment processing issues. And we're all in this industry to serve people's wellness and allow people to enjoy themselves a little bit more. Like that's really what the hemp plant does. And so we kind of all have the same philosophy and theme to our mission. And so there is a sense of, being able to call on each other and raise each other up and find ways to allow each of us to build our own niche in the space.
Yeah. And then in terms of a couple of the really key differentiators, there's so many products out there which are sort of the pre-bottled, CBD sodas and things like that. And it was something that we considered early on until we really started digging into the chemistry behind it and realized that, for the most part, and this is changing, they've historically been really ineffective because cannabinoids begin degrading very quickly when they're added to water. So when you make a sparkling drink and you can it and it's sitting on the shelf for months, it's essentially degrading that entire time. And so one of the things that we realized was when you add the product at the point of consumption, it's a lot more effective. And so that can that you're drinking of, CBD sparkling water that says 20 milligrams on it, you might be lucky to actually absorb, 3, 4, 5 milligrams of it. So that was one thing. Another is the actual formulation that we're using, which is essentially a nano emulsion so that you can absorb it very quickly. And so even with these, canned drinks and things like that, it's still going through what's called first path metabolism, which means that your liver and small intestine has to process it. And so it takes, 90 minutes to 2 hours for onset. We thought there was something a little bit flawed about that. And we were trying to bring a level of immediacy where as soon as you start sipping it, you begin to feel it. And we think from the safety perspective, that's important, of allowing people to titrate their experience and have the right amount for them. And also just imagine if you went to a bar and had an alcoholic drink and it was like, oh yeah, 90 minutes, you're going to feel this, like you'll be ready to go home before you actually kind of have the effect. So, those were a couple of them. And then I think really the most important one is just who we're trying to serve. We don't position ourselves as a cannabis company or as a CBD company. First and foremost, we're a health and wellness company. And so we're not going after people who are super familiar with cannabis and CBD and all these things. We're going after people who are just looking for healthier ways to relax and unwind, whose only context for that, might be alcohol, and just teaching them that there's something new out there for them. So, I think that's the sort of greenfield opportunity, is just, being something that is accessible to everyone. People understand the ritual of a cocktail. And so giving them just another way of having that experience.
Yes, it's so interesting because I think, there's, a plethora of things that you can choose from, but what's going to give you the thing that's going to, one, you actually feel it so you don't take too much of it, but also kind of gives you that good mellow feeling. So would you say that the product, like Elevate, for example, kind of mimics what a high would be, where it's like, okay, I just had some of this and now I feel very relaxed and chill, or based on what users have said?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely very different from a THC high, but it has its own high to it. I mean, I think, in my experience, the best feeling that we can have as a human is being our best selves and being calm and present, in our minds and bodies. When we actually reach that state, and for a lot of people, that's after meditation or post-exercise endorphins or sort of all these things, that feels so good and really is a natural high. Our best state feels amazing. And so in that sense, it's a powerful shift for people who might be not in their ideal state. And so people say, oh my God, I feel so good. But, the ironic thing about it is it's just your best self shining through. That's why you feel amazing.
It's so cool. So I'm sure as you guys actually kind of went into this business, this was not sunshine and lollipops all the way. Can you tell us about a challenging time along the way where you're like, oh my God, how am I ever going to get through this? And then you did.
Well, let's talk about COVID. Right?
I'm shocked that's where you went.
Yeah, so we basically had our entire marketing plan to launch this product we're talking about, Elevate, with South by Southwest, which you probably know of, which is we're located in Austin, and it's a giant festival here, which is great opportunities for us to be a part of. And when that got canceled, we had to quickly pivot and create a new strategy, which Ted, I'll let you speak to.
Yeah, it's funny. We sort of had gone all in on a South by launch and had all these, celebrity parties lined up and incredible endorsements from all these people and getting in all the right hands and things. And, one of the things that's amazing is once people have a chance to try the product for themselves, they have this powerful experience and they totally get it, right? But you sort of need that somatic experience to really understand it. And so that's been a huge challenge for us, is shifting from, in-person events and in-person sales and allowing people to sample and things to, people having to make a purchase sort of sight unseen, right? Without having experienced it for themselves. And so figuring out how to convey a sort of ethereal feeling to someone without them actually feeling it for themselves, I think has been one of the biggest challenges, but also a beautiful opportunity, because, the answer that we keep coming back to is, well, what are our customers and communities saying, right? How do they describe it? And just using that as our advertising. They say it better than we ever could. We can come up with these clever slogans, but just hearing real people describe how they feel when they take it and the impact that it's had on their lives has been both beautiful for us to hear, to stay connected with our why of why we do this and why it's so important. But also from the sales perspective as well, because it sort of engenders that trust with other people who might have it. So, it was definitely a challenge. It looked a little bit touch and go for a minute there at the time, but from that has come this beautiful opportunity of connecting with people who we might not have spoken to and just telling stories of regular people.
Oh, I know the feeling. I'm not sure if you guys noticed, but like my day job is building massive events. And so like I'm like the queen of South by, and you don't want to know how many events I had to cancel.
Yeah.
South by this year. It's just horrifying. And one of the products we had was a cannabis company that was doing gonna do a launch. So I can only imagine the abject nightmare, because it's the whole point is that you want to try before you buy, and once people taste it and get them on video saying how much they love it, that's the thing. But as I said to lots of folks, it's like your resiliency is your power, and so if you can find ways to get people to try it, and then have them be your best advocates, that's how you're always going to win. But that's where it all comes from. It's like you've got to have people who will tell you how awesome the product is, and then they're your sales. So yeah. super psyched that you guys were able to navigate that.
Thank you. Yeah, us too. And I think this is really the future of marketing and advertising generally is a lot of user generated content, and shifting from seeing your customer just as a consumer to really more part of your community and your family. And just listening to them and taking advice from them of what do they want, what would they change. I mean, we're formulating new products right now, and I can tell you it's so much better than it would have been otherwise had we not been going out into the community and getting feedback from people and just really listening. So I think that's a great lesson for all businesses to take is you just have to really listen to people, and you'll find a lot of value from that.
It's so true. And I think, look, we're not going to go back to the way that things were. We're only going to go forward, and what live experiences look like are going to be unique, but they are forever changed. And so the more that we can adapt and be smart about that, those are the folks who are going to end up winning. So it's great to see how you guys were able to navigate that universe. So thinking back on all of this, what do you guys think you'd tell 21-year-old Danielle and Ted?
That's a great question. The thing that comes up for me when you ask that question, that's like straight out of college. The future is wide and vast out in front of you, and it's, only yours to decide what you want to do with it. And I think that I would have told myself to, or I would tell myself to just kind of relax into time a bit more and not rush. I think that there was an expectation to always know the next step, right? And have this linear path forward of what it is that I'm meant to do with my life and create success and achievement and show the world that, I'm marching forward and creating validation of who I am and the great things that I can accomplish. But also, like, I had a giant career pivot, and I'm not resentful of it and I don't regret it. But what if I had just given myself a moment to explore the world and shake it out for myself and explore different dynamics of what it means to be me and travel the world? I think gap year wasn't really a thing when I was leaving high school, but I think that's such a cool thing now. I know it's probably totally different with the pandemic and being able to travel, but for people to just give themselves the space and know that their inner wisdom of what's the right choice for them is going to come through with time and patience.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think for me, I would tell people to embrace failure and not to be afraid of it. If you are not failing at things, you're not taking enough risk, and you're not putting yourself out there, and you're not creating the conditions for you to build something new. And man, I have failed spectacularly at certain things. And, one thing that I can say consistently across all of them, though, is my fear of the failure and consequences of it has always been worse than the actual failure itself. The story that we build up in our head and the excuses that we give about why it won't work and everything like that, that's always more of a struggle than actually just letting it rip and doing the thing and seeing what happens. So that's really the biggest one that I would encourage people is, just don't be embarrassed that something might not work out. It will be okay. You have to just keep trying anyways, and you'll learn a lot from it.
Yeah, no, those are great. And also just so very true. I think, there's a lot with kind of younger generations right now who are like 25 and under, who think they have to have their entire life solved by the time they're 30.
Yeah.
And if they don't, they're a failure. And it's like, and I always say to someone else, I was like, my world started when I was 30. And I'm now 10 years into that. And I'm a completely different person. And tons of failure later. It's okay. And you figure that stuff out. It makes you more resilient. I think, there's a resiliency gap that comes from having gone through stuff versus everything being perfect always. Like, I always make a joke about everyone gets a participation trophy, and that's the worst thing you can ever do. Because if you don't realize how, okay, that sucked when I didn't do it well. Okay, the next time it's going to be awesome because I'm going to do this, 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 and this. That builds you up as opposed to like, well, I didn't do well, but I still got a trophy. Like, you got to go through it. You got to change. You got to learn from your mistakes. And you got to keep going and realize things can change in an instant and be open for those opportunities. So,
yeah, I mean, you're always going to grow. I think that's something that, continues to surprise me is now I'm 33 and I still don't have it figured all out, right? I mean, from the outside, we're leading these lives that I think a lot of people aspire to and that I'm so fortunate to have. But, don't think for a second that like I've stopped growing. I think when I was in college and in my early 20s, I thought, oh, one day things will all settle down and I'll know who I am and I'll know what my path is. And, the truth is that it's a constant exploration and a constant learning and a constant growth. And so, just don't get trapped in the story of someday, it's all going to settle down because it never will, right? You just get comfortable in the flux and comfortable in the uncertainty and in the experimentation. And that's where I think a lot of, contentment can come from.
Yeah, and I would add to that, Laura, for your listeners, this is what I tell our team, this is what I tell my clients. You are resilient. You don't have to go build your resilience up. Like, it is a natural, innate quality that we have. Like, when you look at babies and underneath our rational thinking mind before that's developed, babies are naturally resilient. They start to walk, they fall down, they try things, they fail, they try again. And so that's part of being human. And so to Ted's point about what he said about what he'd say to his 21-year-old self, failing, it's really about your mindset and your belief and confidence in your ability to cope with the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario itself isn't really the problem. It's what are you going to do? Are you going to be okay with it? And yes, you are. Because if you think back to 5 years ago, 10 years ago, there is a situation I'm sure that could come up. You can, re-envision something that happened in your life that caused you to feel like you may not be okay. And guess what? You're here now and you're okay. And you've shown your resilience. And that will keep coming up through life with things like COVID and whatever happens throughout, the rest of our lives.
Yeah. So wonderfully, wonderfully true. And, I think, that kind of dovetails nicely into my next question, because I think a lot of this comes from, the practices and the behaviors that we instill in ourselves to like, let us know that we're going to be okay. And that relates to self-care. So what do you guys do for your self-care other than take Elevate?
So many things. I mean, I've been, in this sort of biohacking experimentation space for a really long time. And I've tried a lot of different things, but, it's funny. The things that I think are most effective are also the simplest. So when you wake up in the morning, don't look at your phone for the first 30 minutes or first 1 hour of your day. It's going to take you from your sort of creative dream state right into, a place of not that, right? Another thing is just get outside and put your feet in the dirt in the morning or on the grass and get some sunshine on your body is so important, I think, for overall well-being. I do, cold showers. I do sauna to sort of push my body, to its edges in different ways. In the evenings, I'll wear blue light blocking glasses because blue light is really harmful to our production of melatonin and good sleep and things like that. So, I've tried so many different things, and I've tried, weird things at the fringe and all the devices and chemicals and all of it. And ultimately, just coming back to the basics is the most important, which is, eat healthy food, move a lot, spend time outside, breathe, meditate, sort of keep the nervous system in check, and everything else is just icing on the cake. But it's really not going to do a lot for you unless you have the basics in place.
And I'll share one specific technique that I've started using that has really created a huge shift for me. Because even though I'm someone in the wellness space, I've found that it's hard for me to find the willpower to get up and meditate for 10 minutes, especially with a kid. Like it's just a challenge to find that time. And so the things that people suggest, like getting up and meditating or journaling or something, isn't really something I've been able to instill as a practice. But what I have been able to do is every day I write a card for someone and I mail it. I put it in my mailbox and I go out the front door and I actually go to my physical mailbox and I open it and I stick a card in the mail. And I just write a card to someone every day sharing my gratitude for them. And the reason that I've been able to stick to it is because it's really going to someone else. It's not just for me. And my motivation is external to share gratitude with someone and have them really feel it from me. And in doing that, it fills me up with joy and satisfaction and gratitude. And then the amazing thing about it is that I start getting calls and texts from people saying, I got your card and it made my day. I love you, wonderful things. And then it just kind of recycling that beautiful gratitude energy and little surprise moments throughout the day where I get a little ping. And so that's something that I offer to you and your listeners, if that sounds interesting.
Awesome. That's so analog and so beautiful. It's like you actually have people's addresses. That I find shocking. It's like, I don't know where anyone lives. Well, also I live in New York City where people like bounce from place to place, so slightly different. But those are awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing. And it's I could keep chatting with you guys for quite a while. But my last question for you guys is, do you have a give and or an ask of the audience?
I guess, my give and ask is kind of the same. I would give people the advice / ask them to do this, which is you need to take your wellness into your own hands, and you need to, have a little bit of agency in taking control over your health and your wellness. I think that, our modern medical system is incredible, and I've worked in the system, and I don't mean to diminish it at all, but we have to appreciate that, the traditional healthcare system is focused on sick care and not true wellness. It's about taking people from a sick state back to a normal state. And I would like to encourage people to focus on how do we go from a normal state to a, I don't know what you want to call it, a transhuman state or an above, sort of default state. And I think that really requires that we just listen to our bodies, that we experiment with different things that might be helpful, and that we ask questions. And when we, have recommendations from our physicians and things, we just really try and do some research and look into it and just be, sort of smart about ourselves and our own wellness and just feel like we're really in control of it and that we're not giving up our power to someone else.
Awesome.
And then, of course, visit our website. I would love to, have people get to try this for themselves. We do this because we're really zealots, for the healing power of plants. People can go to ammahealing.co/elevate. And I think we can drop a discount for your listeners as well, if you'd like, maybe in the show notes. And if people have questions about anything that we were talking about, we love to have this conversation with people. Our door is open. My email is ted@ammahealing.co. Anyone is welcome to email me with questions, and I'll personally make sure that I get back to you.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Anything for you, Danielle?
I'm just going to ride those coattails and offer, my email as well. If you have questions more related to wellness and consciousness, and, creating that wellness from the inside out. So you can visit my website, which is just my name, daniellesunberg.com. And my AMMA email is danielle@ammahealing.co.
Awesome. Well, you guys were a wonderful kickoff of 2021 in terms of Reset podcast episodes. You have such an amazing product line, and I'm super psyched to try it out very, very soon. And we'll put all the details in the show notes for our audience so they can reach out, try out the products, ask any questions they may have for you guys, because I'm sure that, especially since you're making alcohol non-existent, which is amazing. So I think a lot of folks will find a lot of great benefits out of that. So it's going to be fun to see how it all shakes out with our audience. So thank you guys so very much. It was such a delight to have you guys on the show.
Thank you, Laura. A beautiful kickoff to our new year as well. And looking forward to learning from you all year long like we got to over this past year.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. And that is our show.